Hello everyone. I am Dr. Garima Srivastava from IIMT College of Management. I am here to talk about verbal communication. Verbal communication is any communication that uses words to share information with others. These words may be both spoken or written. Communication is about passing information from one person to another. That means when we are talking, there should at least be two people. One is the sender and the other is the receiver. This means both sending and receiving of the message is equally important on both the sides of the information. In terms of verbal communication, a sender should be very careful and should follow certain principles. The very first principle of verbal communication is he should be very well planned with the piece of information he is going to share with his receiver. When the sender is sending a kind of presentation, he should be very well planned, like regarding his audience, topics to be delivered, timings, and other factors of communication. So a person should be very well prepared to deliver his speech. As a sender should always see what is his audience, what language his audience knows, the infrastructure he is into, the medium, the type of medium he is using to send his information, and the audience. Second, clear pronunciation. Of course, when we are talking about verbal communication, we are talking about sentences that the sender is sending to the receiver. So, of course, these sentences can sometimes contain words with different pronunciations. So, a sender should always focus on the pronunciation of the words that are being used in the sentences. Synonyms and antonyms are also an important part of communication. They should also be considered under clear pronunciation. To make oral presentations meaningful, the receivers should be very clearly told that these particular things, these particular words have certain pronunciation. The words with same pronunciation and different meanings should be focused and separately told to the receivers. Brevity. Effective oral communication desires a message to be very brief. If the sender takes long time for talking, his message gets longer, and therefore there may be a confusion or conflict in the receiver because he would not be able to understand long sentences or long terms of information. Therefore, brief communications, brief sentences, brief points of the information becomes important. The sender should break the long information into small sentences, brief information, so that the receivers are able to understand them easily. Therefore, thumbnail sketch should be made for the information to be exchanged between the sender and the receiver. The fourth principle, precision. Precision is needed to make oral communication effective. There should be no confusion in words that are being said rather than the message to be delivered should be very specific and there should be no misunderstanding. If the sender sees that there is something misleading or misunderstanding happening between the receivers, he should be continuously focusing on the words, on the sentences, on the piece of information that he is sharing at that moment itself. That is why it is important when the verbal communication is done, an eye to eye contact and body language of the receiver has to be checked by the sender. The precision of the language, precision of the information, if not taken into consideration while giving the information, will lead to misunderstanding amongst the receiver. Natural voice. All sorts of unnatural voice that may occur, that may distort the message, should be avoided by the sender. This can be done if correct infrastructure is selected, as well as these unnatural voices are reduced to their extent. A natural voice can do a lot to make oral presentation effective. Logical sequence. When the idea is shared between sender and the receiver, ideas should be organized in a sequential order or a priority order. If the priority is not there, a confusion is always there in the receivers because they gain the information in different orders and may not be able to connect one sentence with the another. An unorganized idea do not provide clear sense and therefore logical ideas give the clear sense of the information. Information means instructions that are given to the receivers, and instructions are given because the work has to be done by the receiver. So, if the instructions are not in order, the receivers will not be able to understand and confusion may arise. Suitable words. Words with different meanings to different people in different situations may occur if verbal communication is there. Therefore, a speaker should always be using common words, simple words, and familiar words, familiar to the language that the receiver are understanding, should be used by the sender so that the receiver can react to the message and start up their queries if there are any with the sender. Attractive presentation. After all, this is a verbal presentation. This is a verbal communication. Presentation of the sender as well as whatever he is presenting should be attractive. It is another principle of oral communication. Courteous. Courtesy costs nothing but gives much to the receiver or the sender. So, a speaker should always be courteous. He should always be humble. Courtesy means establishment of relationship of trust between sender and the receiver. If this trust is not there in the receiver, he will not be able to develop a relationship between sender and the receiver. If this relationship is not there, then the receiver will not receive the same information in the same form as the sender wants to send. So, courteousness helps to create a good impression in the minds of the listener about the sender of the information. A sender should always avoid emotions whenever he is talking to the receivers. Speaker must control his emotions to make oral communication effective. Too much of the emotion in the information will make the speaker away from the main subject. Therefore, emotions plus a combination of other things, other facts, other psychological facts into the information is important to be sent by the sender. Emphasis. Whenever we are talking about certain kind of information, certain points need to be emphasized. Therefore, the speaker should be knowledgeable enough regarding the portion of the information what is very important to the receiver. This important portion should be focused, should be emphasized again and again to the receiver so that the receiver thinks that this particular portion is the important part of the information. Giving emphasis gives respective points and helps draw attention of the receiver towards the information. Last one, controlling gesticulation. Now, gesticulation is a gesture, especially a dramatic one, used by the speaker, emphasizing on one word. Speaker on many occasions, consciously or unconsciously, gesticulates for the expression of his ideas or thoughts. This habit should be avoided by the sender. Otherwise, the application of such habit may lead to disinterest of the audience. Besides, objective information, the capacity of the listener, interesting language, proper fluency should be considered as the principles of oral communication. Now, when we talk about verbal communication, we have 4 types of verbal communication. Intrapersonal communication. This type of communication is extremely private and restricted to oneself. Unlike interpersonal communication, which is exchange between 2 or more people, intrapersonal communication is communication within oneself. There are many other names to this concept like self-talk, intermonologue, inner speech, inner experience, or inner discourse. Interpersonal communication. This form of communication takes place between 2 people and is thus called as one-to-one conversation. Interpersonal communication involves exchange of information, ideas, feelings between different people in the organization. Face-to-face communication is often involved in interpersonal communication, such as hearing, seeing, feeling body language, facial expression, and gestures. Third one, small group communication. Small group communication refers to communication among 3 or more people who interact verbally or non-verbally and perform certain formal or informal roles within the organization. They feel a sense of belongingness and collaborate with each other. They work in a project, they work in a team in the organization. Public communication. Public communication means any material that is communicated to the public, either directly or through different kinds of media, like print media, broadcast media, or electronic form. For example, it includes seminars, press conferences, political campaign, and public speaking events. Political campaign and public speaking events typically are done by the radios, newspapers, televisions to share ideas with the public. The last but not the least, conversation control. When we talk to each other, why do we do it? We have certain objective between the sender and the receiver. Sender has to send an information to the receiver and convert or influence the receiver in a positive form so that they follow the instructions to be followed. The ability to control a conversation, which ensures the conversation towards a positive direction and meets your needs. This is called as conversation control. This is always done by the sender if he is courteous and has full piece of information. Whether you are using your conversation control to lead the business discussion or a personal talk, employing different techniques will lead to conversation from heading into areas you don't wish to discuss and heading into areas you wish to discuss. Conversation control refers to the skills of listening and talking in a positive way, in a meaningful way, so that an appropriate time the information is converted into a positive form. Conversation control helps participants conclude effectively and satisfactorily and agree on a certain particular point. Now, conversation control, we can say, is a key managerial skill. A manager must know when to talk and when to listen. Conversation skills include all the key effective performance areas of the sender. Listening is equally important as is sending of the information. Therefore, conversation control will include listening as well as speaking. Conversation control is the manner or the extent to which the individuals direct or restrain communication interaction. It is a dimension which is considered along the communication rate and accuracy. Therefore, a successful communication is one where it is converted into a positive form by the sender and with agreement by the receiver. There are certain techniques which we can say can be used to control conversation by the sender. Very first one, make the purpose of the conversation clear and work towards it. That means the objective of the giving the information should be clear in the mind of the sender, and this should be kept till the end of the conversation. Speak slowly and clearly. All the points that you are going to speak in front of the receiver, they should be clearly presented to the receiver and should be ensured the receiver has understood each and every point as the sender wants to give it. Use body language. Suppose you are not able to send some information through verbal communication. You can use other parts of the communication like body language, audio visuals, paralanguage to support your verbal communication. Apart from a good speaker, a sender should also be a good listener. Then only he will be able to give a proper feedback to his receiver. Be clear about what you want to do and what you don't want to do or speak in your information. Therefore, all these parts can help you prepare and to be a good sender. For a good sender or for a speaking of a good verbal speaking, it is important to follow certain principles which have been given in this presentation. Thank you.